welcome to The Edge, where we take an in-depth analysis of today's top stories by looking beyond the edge. We'll bring you not just the facts, but also deep insights into the topics with expert opinions and social media reactions. Let's make a start with our look beyond the edge. Israeli far-right politician Naftali Bennett, a kingmaker whose Yamina party has 6 key seats in parliament, has said he would join a governing coalition that could end the rule of the country's longest-serving leader, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What has led to Netanyahu's downfall? Egypt's Suez Canal Authority announced that the captain of Evergreen was fully responsible for the grounding of the huge cargo vessel that blocked the canal for 6 days in March. What effects did the blockage have on global shipping industry? And US gun violence is one of the major problems of the country, with the latest shooting in Florida killing 2 people and injuring at least 20. How can gun violence be prevented, and what measures must be taken? These are the top 3 stories that we'll be taking a look at today from Beyond the Edge. Far-right party leader Naftali Bennett threw his crucial support behind a unity government in Israel to unseat Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in what could be the end of a political era. But who is Naftali Bennett? Our infographic explains. Far-right party leader Naftali Bennett has given his crucial support to Israel's unity government to unseat Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in what could be the end of a political era.
The leader of a far-right Israeli political party on Sunday declared he would join with a centrist faction in a new unity government that could spell the end of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year grip on power. Naftali Bennett, who leads the ultranationalist Yamina party, said he was convinced that only an alliance with centrist and left-wing parties would save the nation.
I am announcing today that it is my intention to work with all my strength to establish a national unity government together with my friend Yair Lapid, so that, God willing, together we can rescue the country from its tailspin and return it on its path.
Centrist Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party finished second to Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party in the latest inconclusive parliamentary elections. Lapid has worked to cobble together a potentially volatile coalition. A power-sharing deal would see Bennett and Lapid take turns as prime minister. Israel has held 4 elections in the past 2 years, none of which delivered a clear winner and left Netanyahu in office as head of a caretaker government. Bennett was seen as something of a kingmaker between Netanyahu's push for a right-wing coalition and Lapid seeking a national unity government. On Sunday, he said he made the best choice for his country.
There is no right-wing government. 4 rounds of elections and 2 months proved to us all that there simply is not a right-wing government to be led by Netanyahu. It's either a 5th election or a unity government.
Netanyahu responded on television, calling the proposed coalition a, quote, left-wing government and a danger to Israel's security and future.
And I'm joined live from Israel by journalist Tal Schneider. Tal, thank you for joining us here today on The Edge. Well, we've been waiting a long time to find out whether Israel will finally get a government. 4 elections have passed already, and now the clock is ticking again with Yair Lapid just 48 hours left, I believe, to form a new government. Well, what is the latest situation?
They're expecting to finalize all agreements, coalition agreements, within the next day or so. And then Lapid, who holds the mandate to form a government, will announce the president that he is able to form a government. And instead of being himself the prime minister, he plans to announce on Naftali Bennett as the first prime minister in a rotation agreement. So within 2 years from now, Lapid himself will become the prime minister if this government will stick together. This is the expectation. Obviously, we may have some obstacle at the last minute, but it seems that they have some disagreements, but most of the articles are already agreed.
Now, it's quite an interesting situation because, as I said, there's been 4 attempts to form, unsuccessfully, to have a stable government. And this coalition is a very broad spectrum of politics. Could you explain to us a little bit about that?
Exactly. It's starting from the very far liberal left, Meretz party, sort of a green party and a pro-state solution and pro-coexistence. And it ends all the way to the right side of the Israeli parliament with Yamina, who is basically religious, Zionist religious, pro-settlers party. And as said, Yamina is going to be the leadership of this government. So very, very peculiar situation. We have never seen anything like that. Lapid and Bennett themselves justify the maneuver or justify this process, saying that Israel really needs a unity government. As you may have seen, we had riots between Jewish and Arabs inside the country. We had a severe incitement and severe relationship between all parts of society. So they come up and say, this is a really good step to have the different Israeli communities come together and form a government. I have to tell you that I don't know if that will stick because politics is always problematic, especially after 12 years of a government by Netanyahu only. He is the longest-serving prime minister. He was also a prime minister 3 years prior to that. So altogether, 15 years of a country that is only 73 years old. That's a lot. And they will definitely need to overcome a crisis among Netanyahu's supporters who think this is devastating to have someone else other than him ruling the country. Obviously, I don't think so because it's a democracy and we should have a change here. But I can see why the right wing is going, ballistic, thinking this is maybe the end of an era and a difficult situation and so on.
As bedfellows, Lapid would seem to be happier with somebody like Netanyahu. The politics, from what I understand, are slightly more aligned than maybe some of the leftist groups that would be in this coalition. Why is it that one of the things that seems to be uniting them is getting rid of Netanyahu?
Well, I think Lapid wasn't happy with Netanyahu at all. He wasn't in his government since 2014. Naftali Bennett, on the other hand, wanted to have, first and foremost, a right-wing government with the Likud. But Netanyahu was unable to form a government for 4 election cycles, as you mentioned earlier. You are right to suggest that, the one thing that is unifying all of those forces is their, wish to oust Netanyahu. Netanyahu has been under a criminal trial for bribery and breach of trust and fraud. And because of this criminal trial, there is huge mistrust. People think that he may take, political or maybe policy steps in order to embolden his leadership, and not based on the merits. So he's facing huge criticism from many people, right and left. You have, other than Yamina, you have two more right-wing parties who are opposing him and were running through the election, specifically on the fourth election, but also before that. The ticket was, we are running as a right-wing parties that promise you that we will not sit with Netanyahu whatsoever. So you have a wide range of people who think...
Sorry, we're running short on time, but there's one question I have to ask you. You referred to riots between Jews and Arabs earlier. Those confrontations were particularly over Sheikh Jarrah, and I know that that Naftali Bennett is very pro-settlement. Now, of course, what does this mean for the Palestinians? Because it was recognized just last week again in the United Nations that the occupation has responsibilities, maybe some illegal aspects to it. But what does it mean to the Palestinians in the occupied territories?
Well, it's a good and very complicated question. They may have, in this government, Naftali Bennett entering for the first time ever a Palestinian Israeli, Mansour Abbas, the chairman of the Islamic movement, actually is going to be part of the government. So when you ask me what is going to be the implication for the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria or in Gaza, it's really hard to say. Obviously, on security measures, I don't think there are going to be any change. On foreign affairs or on the issues of diplomacy with the Palestinians, I think we're looking into a stalemate. Not much will change. Definitely, this is going to be the core issue, the core problematic issue of this government. But again, it is unprecedented for a Palestinian Israeli, Mansour Abbas, the head of the Islamic movement, to be part of this coalition. This has never happened before. So you have, good and bads.
Well, maybe it will bring some unexpected opportunities. Let's hope so, and let's hope the opportunities for peace between everybody living in the country.
I hope so.
Tal Schneider, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge. Thank you. Now, moving on to our next topic, the 400-metre-long ship Ever Given was wedged in the Suez Canal for 6 days earlier this year, causing frustration for the global shipping industry. Our following infographic has the main facts about the blockage. The Suez Canal Authority says it will not resort to international arbitration in the case of the Ever Given container ship, which ran aground in the waterway more than 2 months ago.
An investigative committee assigned by the Suez Canal Authority to look into the case of the Ever Given cargo vessel that blocked the Suez Canal earlier in the year said it was hopeful a settlement would be reached with the vessel's owner.
We have drawn up a business plan. This plan is going in balance with the negotiations process that took place with the ship owner company and are still taking place. And the truth is, we have been given great signs of goodwill.
Sunday's news conference came a day after an Egyptian court adjourned the case to allow more time for negotiations aiming at resolving the financial dispute between the SCA and the vessel's owner.
With regard to international arbitration, as long as there is a debt that has to be paid, then it is a subject to the provisions of the country in which the accident occurred, whether it be in Egypt or any Arab or European country, until the debt is paid.
The dispute centers on the compensation amount the SCA is claiming for the salvage of the Ever Given, which ran aground in March, blocking the crucial waterway for 6 days in March. At first, the SCA demanded $916 million in compensation, which was later lowered to $550 million. The money would cover the salvage operation costs of the stalled canal traffic and lost transit fees for the week the Ever Given blocked the canal. The vessel's Japanese owner Shoei Kisen Kaisha and insurers said the demand is still too high. They previously had offered $150 million in compensation, but that was rejected by the Canal Authority.
And I'm joined live from Istanbul by Mohamed Oktay, who's an Egyptian economic consultant. Mohamed, thank you for joining us again here today on The Edge. It's remarkable. It's 2 months since the Suez Canal was blocked for 6 days by the Ever Given, and of course now they're trying to work out the repercussions of that. First and foremost, as we just seen in the video, the question of compensation is being discussed. With the usage of the canal, I'm sure there are very strict rules and regulations tied into compensation. Well, can you explain to us a little bit about that?
That ship blockage of the Suez Canal had caused a lot of havoc on the Suez Canal traffic and also on the global international trade, and had caused irreparable harm, we would say, to the Suez Canal reputation, that a blockage by one ship can block the global trade in such a way, and affects a lot of businesses globally. We have to remember that ship has on board around 20,000 containers, and that's a lot of goods going to a lot of companies all across Europe, and I'm sure all of these companies have been affected so far. And the matter of the compensation now have been referred to the Ismailia court in Egypt to try to resolve this. But there are some negotiation between the Suez Canal Authority and the ship owners to try to get out-of-court settlement. So the court had gave them until June 20th to decide between themselves if they're going to agree on a number. So far, the Suez Canal had asked initially to $916 million, lowered it to $600 million, and now it's stands around $550 million. The ship owners are offering $150 million. So there's a wide gap for compensation between the both. But there is a very crucial point on the definition of the operation. Was it a salvage operation or a refloating operation? And that definition can make a huge difference in the compensation entitled to the Suez Canal Authority.
Indeed, and I imagine that coming up behind this as well, some of the other ship operators who were impeded during that period, would they also be entitled to sue for compensation?
It will be up to the insurance companies. Most of these freighters are insured internationally, and the goods on board also insured. So they have to go back and ask for damages from the insurance companies, and the insurance companies go after the ship owners or the canal authorities to decide who's at fault and try to recoup some of these insurance claims. I'm sure a lot of that are going to be in tens of millions of dollars, because there's a lot of damage affecting a lot of companies. If we look just at the companies who still has goods on board, still waiting for it to be delivered to Europe, I'm sure they're incurring huge losses, and the insurance companies all across Europe are paying for the damages right now.
This in shipping has always been one of the biggest issues, whether it's through a canal or across an ocean for hundreds of years. That's probably the foundation of the insurance industry. So there's a tremendous amount of experience there. But interestingly, I need to ask you, was the shipping industry, was global trade ready for an incident like this?
Absolutely not. I mean, it came at the worst possible time during the COVID crisis and the slowdown of international trade. And to have a major artery such as Suez Canal to be blocked in such a way for 6 days had a huge impact on many industries, particularly the oil, the energy sector. We've seen prices shut up by a bit, oil prices, because of the deliveries, the slow of deliveries to Europe and across the Mediterranean, even to the Gulf of Texas in the U.S. So it affected almost everyone globally, and to think such a blockage of one waterway will have such an impact is an eye-opener for a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of measures are going to be taken to try to avoid that in the future, not just in the Suez, but also on other arteries across the globe.
So, and indeed, that was my next question. What are the long-term repercussions of this? Will the control mechanisms within the canal be changed? And might it be necessary to find an alternative route?
Well, there are talk of some alternative routes now via supposedly a plan for a canal or a railway system via Israel to link the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. Of course, we have the Chinese Silk Road over railroads from Beijing all the way to London. So we will see a lot of movement on these two sectors, particularly the new Chinese Silk Road, because most of the deliveries are from China to Northern Europe. But I would imagine we'll see a lot of investment into widening the canal and investing in navigation systems and weather equipment systems to try to avoid such an incident in the future. We still don't know the exact cause of the incident. The captain is blaming poor weather and also the guidance from the Egyptian pilots who were on board, and the Suez Canal Authority is blaming the captain for bad maneuvering and entering the canal at such a high speed. So we'll have to wait until the court or the negotiation between the two sides tell us exactly what happened and how we can avoid that in the future in such a waterway.
Well, one thing we've learned is just how fragile our transit systems are, and that we need to take care of how we manage them. Mohammed Doctor, unfortunately that's all we got time for. Thank you so much for joining me today here on The Edge. Thank you. And our final topic, yet again, is gun violence in the United States, which is a huge problem. Our following infographic explains where America stands on the right to bear arms. Yet another shooting in the United States has left 2 people dead and injured at least 20. The shooting took place outside a billiards club in a northern Miami town.
At least 2 people have died and more than 20 were injured in a shooting outside a billiards club in Hialeah, a town to the north of Miami in Florida. A white Nissan Pathfinder pulled up to the location and 3 people got out with assault weapons and handguns and started firing into the crowd that was gathered for a concert at the venue. The shooting took place early Sunday morning, as it is one of a number that have taken place in the past few weeks in the United States.
This billiard establishment was rented out for a concert. During the concert, patrons were standing outside of the business when a white SUV pulled up where 3 subjects stepped out of the vehicle with assault rifles and handguns and began shooting indiscriminately into the crowd, of which we believe is a targeted act of gun violence. Unfortunately, multiple people were shot. As of right now, we have 20 to 25 victims at various hospitals around the community, as well as 2 deceased victims on the scene.
A report by the Gun Violence Archive, a nonprofit research group, said that there were at least 200 mass shootings in the country in the first 132 days of this year.
Despicable act of gun violence, a cowardly act. We have our investigators on the scene. We're asking for any information from the community. Anyone who has any tips on these individuals, please give it to us, 305-471-TIPS. This type of gun violence has to stop. Every weekend it's the same thing. This is targeted. This is definitely not random. My condolences to the families and to the victims.
So we've listened to insights from around the world on today's top stories, but let's have a roundup of the statements. Before closing our programme, let's have a look at social media to hear your voices and reactions on today's top stories with Miriam Carlson.
Thank you so much, Andy. Hello, that is right. We are taking a look at today's trending topics on social media. Let alone this year, over 246 people have died in mass shootings in the United States. And the question about gun control has divided American people between those who are pro and those who are against. We're taking a look at some of the comments with the hashtag gun control. And the first one for today is coming from, in Twitter, Kathleen Mary. She is saying, "It is sad that I feel like every week there is a mass shooting, or just a shooting in general. It sucks that the world has become this way it is." The next one is coming from Mary J. Rowett. She is saying, "Banning or regulating weapons will not prevent all situations in which we might kill or be killed. Gun bans themselves are acts of aggression. They stop people at gunpoint if necessary from having or using firearms. Gun control is the ultimate contradiction." And the last one is coming from Victoria Baldassano. She's saying, "To that, more than 20 injured in shooting at Miami area concert, police say. 4 days after the San Jose rail yard murder is another act of gun violence. With automatic weapons, gun control is a long overdue. We should also look at violence embedded in the United States culture." And now let's take a look at a video of today which shows the life in a refugee camp during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is all for me for now. Back to you, Andy.
And that's all for this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boyne. Stay tuned. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth analysis on the top stories and a look beyond the edge.